Sanskrit is what is called a vibrational language. The meaning of the language is the sound itself and the experience that you have with the sound. It's the frequency and the meaning of the frequency. There's no abstraction to it. And again, this is one of those things that makes the Western mind go, like, what?
Completely,
How is that even
completely.
possible? But just, you don't have to believe it right now. I want to emphasize that. You can try it and just see how it lands.
What if the best chapter of your life hasn't even begun yet? What lies within you is the power to live brighter, bolder, and truer than ever before. So welcome to Vivatude, where caregiving, connections, and career come into balance, and where your vitality, vision, and voice shines through. Because the revolution isn't out there, it's already within you. Welcome to Vivatude.
Welcome back to Vivatude. We are talking with Rebecca Prien, author of This Again, Untangle the Root of What Distracts and Derails You from Your Life's Work. And we're talking about those patterns that so many of us have. Like we want to do something, and yet we are the ones that stop ourselves. And Rebecca has helped identify some really core themes on how people can break through those beliefs and step into a more full expression of life. So, Rebecca, thanks again for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about how your work, your background, your practice has woven in those insights and how you help teach your clients and so many people to achieve that level of freedom and authenticity so they can do their life's work?
So, this work is really the expression or the culmination of a personal search. So, for my entire life, I have very much felt equally right-brained and left-brained. There have not been a lot of places to do that in equal measure or use those capacities at the same time. And so I do feel like kind of one of the questions of my life has been, how can I be and use both of those things, both of those parts of myself at the same time, and not in a way that divides me, right? So commonly, I mean, I was given the advice, right, as a young person, well, do X as a profession and do Y as a hobby. Wouldn't that be great? And that's the way I started out. I became an attorney and I painted and I wrote as a hobby. And most of the time, those things were hidden from each other.
Mm.
People in one world didn't know about the other world. Um, in the course of law school, I actually damaged my knees running. And the only thing I could do was go to a yoga class because the standing poses of the yoga class um, mimicked what I was doing in physical therapy.
Hmm.
And so that's how I was introduced to it, actually at a gym in Boston. And I practiced like that for a few years. And about 3 years in, I was introduced to one of the texts of yoga, the Yoga Sutras. And I learned that there was a language that expressed this type of practice. And that it wasn't just the physical postures, it actually was an entire worldview, philosophy, and additional set of practices. Now, I am a language person. I've loved language. I've always flourished in language. And so this fascinated me. And it felt like the first time that something had lit every part of me up, that it had lit the spiritual part up, the part that loves language, the part that wanted to move my body, right? That part that was interested in the brain, the part, and I was like, this is fascinating. I have to follow this. And so I did. 2 years later, I moved to Atlanta for a job, and I wound up practicing at what was an ashram, not just a yoga studio, but an ashram. Um, and I was at a meditation where the teacher of the lineage that the ashram was in was teaching. And she took us down into the earth during this meditation. And I just had this entire full person being experience of, oh my God, I'm home. Like, this is it. Like, this practice, this set of practices is what I've been looking for.
Mm.
So it's like my experience as an attorney and my experience as a yoga practitioner have always been combined. Like, they started at the same time. I haven't ever been a lawyer without practicing yoga. And, you know, my pursuit of the practices of yoga and of yoga beyond the physical practices has continued to deepen. And so at that time in Atlanta, um, I was taught a mantra in Sanskrit, which was the language of the Yoga Sutras that had fascinated me 2 years before. And the other element of this is that I have always had a voice that I haven't known what to do with. It's loud, it's resonant, it's big. I get told to shush a lot. Um, and so I was just really interested in this mantra practice. It hit me in my core. And so I drove my car, I parked it next to a park down the street from my apartment so no one would hear me. And I started chanting in my car. And I was like, oh my God, my voice can do this. And oh my God, this feels amazing. It was really experiential. And that's what I love about the practice of mantra. That is what I love about all the yogic practices, is that they're experiential. You do
Mm.
them, they are what they do, and you experience it, and then you decide, oh, I'm really curious about that. What else will it do? And you do it again. And I was very much taught that way. I was not taught in a like pedagogical sense. I was taught in a here's a practice. Go ahead, go do that. See what happens. Come back and tell me. you know, and that itself, I mean, is a totally non-wet that itself blows the Western mind apart. It's like, what is happening right now? What am I learning? Why am I doing this? I mean, I mentioned in the book, like, I, for me, like, I was a history major at Princeton and I'm a lawyer. Like, this is not at all the way I was used to learning. It was not how I thought my mind worked. It wasn't what I thought I needed. And this book, this again, was never the book I thought I would write. Um,
Mm.
so it has been a very experiential and revelatory journey. And I have gotten exactly what I have needed as as I have experienced each of these things. And then also as the book was written, the book itself actually was a profound personal experience as well as a creative experience and a core part of my body of work, which sort of speaks to that paradigm of the parallel shift of going from a pedagogical or strategic top-down approach to a revelatory, experiential, evolutionary approach to the way that we engage with life and the way that we engage with our work.
Yeah, beautiful. I have read your book and it is phenomenal. And just to try to sum up what I interpreted, what I heard you say for the average listener, it's as if we're taught a particular way of showing up, and most of it is linear, it is intellectual, it is we have to understand all of the things and we have to know why and we have to do it. And when you stepped into that yoga world, and especially not just a yoga studio, but an actual ashram with teachers, and they said, here, do this practice. It didn't have all the whys. It didn't have the intellectual background. It didn't have like, oh, this is the reason we're doing this. You have to understand all the things. You were just like, okay, let me see what happens. experience, and you had a full-bodied experience. And what you mentioned in the book that I didn't hear you say just now, but it's the notion of sound itself, right? The
Yeah.
sound and the resonance and how that moves in your body. And mantra is because we don't necessarily, our intellect doesn't know or doesn't have to know, doesn't have to understand why it works, because these are ancient practices that the vibration has a particular manifestation. I don't know. You can tell me more about that. So what is it about that, on what those sounds do, even if our intellect, our linear brain doesn't understand it? How is it that that has an effect on our energy, on our energetic field?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think the most powerful thing about the practice of Sanskrit mantra is that it is sound vibration. That is exactly what it is, and it is how it functions. And it functions according to that physics. It doesn't function according to us understanding how it functions or having to change our mind to get our mind in a different place. So,
Yeah, that's important.
Sanskrit,
That's key.
yeah, that's key. And that's the key difference between it and some other practices that you might have tried, right? Where if you use your mind to try and change how you think or experience something, you have to convince your mind somehow.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's not really that willing to do that. I had a teacher, her name was Swami Jai Devi, and she would call the mind the great barrier sheath, because it's the thing that keeps us from our own realization, right? Our own transformation. It keeps us
Yes.
from changing our patterns. And
Yes.
what Sanskrit mantra is really phenomenal at is helping us change those patterns. Um, and I can get into a little bit of what they found from a Western science point of view of why that is. But let me go back to why, in its own terms, mantra functions that way.
Okay.
So, and this is not any mantra. So the word mantra is used commonly in our Western culture now to mean anything that we say to ourselves again and again, right? Like an affirmation or a way of being in the world, right? We might put it on our mirror, and people will say, oh, this is going to be my mantra from now on. And it's in English and we understand it. And it's a way of reflecting back to ourselves what we want reflected back to ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't function in the same way that a Sanskrit mantra functions. Sanskrit mantra functions because Sanskrit is what is called a vibrational language. The meaning of the language is the sound itself and the experience that you have with the sound. It's the frequency and the meaning of the frequency. There's no abstraction to it. And again, this is one of those things that makes the Western mind go, like, what?
Completely.
How is that even
Completely.
possible? But just, you don't have to believe it right now. I want to emphasize that. You can try it and just see how it lands. Um, but there's no abstraction. So it's like, in English, if we say the moon, we're pointing at the moon. We have a placeholder of a word that symbolizes what we want to tell you about, right?
Hmm.
But when we say the word moon, we don't really have an understanding of the qualities of the moon. Do you have a felt sense of the moon? Not really.
Not
Okay.
really.
So then, but the language of Sanskrit, it's vibrationally holds qualities that are attributed to an experience that is moon-like. So Chandra, Chandra, Chandra. I don't know if you can feel that as I say it, but that's the word for moon. It has a really different quality and experience to it than moon. So each of the
Go ahead.
letters this yeah each of the letter I could go on and on about this, so you might just need to stop me.
That's
Each
okay.
of the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet has a particular vibration and resonates at the vibration of elements and forces of the universe. So there's a
Yes.
sound, yeah, there's a sound for fire. Ra, ra, ra. And when you chant it, you can feel the like flicker, right? The heat. Um, there's a, there's a sound for limitation. There's a sound. So all these forces for expansion, for time. And it's all vibrational. And we know, and I don't want to get into the like connective tissue of translating the vibrational experiential elements into, the quantum physic elements, because that is not my expertise. And quite honestly, we haven't mapped that closely yet, right? We don't have all the answers for that. Um, but the sound is the thing. And so the experience that you have with the sound is the thing, is the meaning of the word. The other piece of this is that sound goes past, it bypasses the meaning making parts of your brain. So it's operating on a different level of functionality physiologically and neurologically in your body than the part of you that's making meaning and trying to understand. So it literally bypasses that.
You are the first person, and I think it's because you are a Western woman trained in, Western academia, who was able to explain that in a way that I was able to understand it for the first time. I
Mm,
mean, it's like, somebody says Sanskrit mantra. It's like, that sounds nice for them. It's not my practice. I have no idea why I would do that. I've heard about, transcendental meditation. They give people a mantra. Yeah, okay, that's nice. But when you explained it, because everything that I've read too about transcendent states of spiritual awareness, in order to get to those higher levels that we talk about, enlightenment, bliss, even higher elevations of love and generosity, we have to get beyond the mind. And when I first heard that, it was like sideways dog. I'd like, wait, what? Get beyond the mind. The mind is how I get everywhere. And it's like, no, there's something beyond that. And so when you wrote about that in your book, I was like, oh, now I understand. So in my words, and I don't know how accurate this is, but it's like by sitting in this practice and chanting a particular mantra, and there's, I know nothing about the levels yet. I've only done your little practice so far, the one that you share freely, but it's an invitation to step beyond the linear intellect into a vibrational pattern that is actively working to change me, to change my energy without my mind getting involved in understanding how. Is that anywhere
yeah,
near?
I think that's an accurate way to say it, and I share in the book, like that's why I stuck with it. Like I have a very snarky mind. I do.
I
And
resemble that too.
every other practice that I had tried, I would talk back to.
Oh, yes.
Right? It knew it was right. It was smarter than every other practice that I had. Until this one, I was fascinated. I was like, okay, wow, I feel really different. This is really interesting. Wow, I can make those sounds. Wow, my voice will really do that. That's really cool. That feels really good in my body. Right? It's a very, very experiential longing and satisfaction. That was the call and response.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and so, and what ends up happening is that now Western medicine, as they study these meditative practices, and I say that with a caveat because the studies of Western modern science of these contemplative practices, including Sanskrit mantra, are limited. There's a small universe of them, right? There are not that many studies right now. And the other limitation of them is that they don't fit cleanly into how a scientific study is designed. they don't fit. They are a holistic practice, which doesn't fit very nicely with a double-blind study. Right? So there are
Yeah.
limitations. There are
Mhm.
also limitations in how when I started reading, I was like, oh, there's limitations to actually those who have designed the studies understanding of the practices. So the three things they're comparing, as a practitioner, I would expect to get different results from two of the things they're comparing, even
Mm.
within the context of mantra itself. So I say that because we have such a default, myself included, to go, oh my God, science is telling me this. Yes. Right. And say, okay, I believe it now. I'm convinced. But preliminary studies, what they are showing or what they are finding is that the way that Sanskrit mantra operates is that it entrains your brain and it changes your breath rate, it changes your heart rate variability, and it changes the brain wave function in only typically one part of your brain, the cerebral cingulate cortex. And what it ends up doing is it puts the cerebral cingulate cortex in a delta wave function, which means it is asynchronous with the rest of your brain. And
Ooh.
I think, and this is a bit, well, it isn't even speculative. Some of the studies also make this they think it's indicative of why it helps you break a pattern, because this same disconnect is what they've seen in practices and studies that have been done on addictive patterns, cigarette smoking, alcoholism, etc. So there's a physiology to it, as well as a vibrational component and an experiential component. And I find that fascinating. And I find it fascinating that it was discerned at least 6,000, if not more, years ago through meditative practice itself for the very purpose of helping us change our patterns.
That is powerful. So we are going to be right back and dive deeper into some applications. So what do people use this for? So stay with us on Vivatude.
And thanks for listening to Vivatude. 4 hosts, 1 each week. We help you revivitude your next chapter because purpose, passion, and prosperity isn't out there. They're already within you. Brighter, bolder, truer. Vivatude.